Hello there and welcome to this recap of the 9th round of the candidates. The FIDE Candidates Tournament currently being played in Yekaterinburg in Russia. And before this round, the leader Jan Nepo. He has 5 points out of 8 and is followed by Caruana and Maxim Vasilya. They are half a point behind him. And then 1 point behind him is Alekseenko Giri. So we're going to see how today's round progressed, and then we'll see the standings after round 9. So we're going to start with the game between Alexander Grischuk and Jan Nepo, the leader. He's facing his compatriot, and he has the black pieces. Let's not get any disturbance here, thank you. And we have the Grunfeld. Nepo likes to play the Grunfeld, just like Maxim Vasilya, but he's maybe not as predictable in his openings. But okay, we do have the Grunfeld and we have the exchange variation. So knight takes e3, the exchange, bishop g7, f3, and Grischuk plays this rook b1 line, and this can get very theoretical. And the main move here is bishop e2, and lines like this with queen a5 check quite often gives up the pawn on a2. Gets very theoretical, but Grischuk avoids it and plays h3. We'll get the same line, but maybe white can save a tempo or play in a different way. Anyway, it looks like he's trying to, get a different kind of nuance. And we see it here after knight c6, he plays d5. A pawn sack, but probably temporary, because after this, bishop d2. Black is forced to trade because, well, there are two pieces hanging actually. White will take the bishop if the knight moves, and vice versa. So we take on d2, queen takes d2. And now black plays knight d4, giving back the pawn seemingly. If we move the knight anywhere else, to a5 or b8 or something, then white is very quick to create something, h4, h5. And yeah, black might regret having started this game. So knight d4 to eliminate the knight. So black is willing to give the pawn back. And here Grischuk plays what I think is a novelty, bishop to c4. At least according to my database. If white were to take the pawn, which looks natural, I think black is very quick. And he might be able to use the fact that the king is still in the center. And for instance, bishop c4, we can take it. And bishop e6, still up in on the bishop. White can castle, but black is very quick to equalize here, probably get his pieces in, and not much to play for. So Grischuk had another idea. He wanted to play for piece activity, sacrifice the pawn after e5, he castles. Okay, queen d6, f4. So he wants to use the f-file. He has a slight lead in development, but is it enough? Queen f4, he trades the queens, and banking on the pressure on the f-file here. Maybe rook f1 is coming. Bishop e5 first, and now rook f1. But here, Nepo starts to defend really actively. He plays bishop d7. So no time to take because the bishop is hanging. Bishop back. Rook c8. Rook on the open file, attacking the bishop. Bishop b5, attacking the rook. No time to take on f7. The rook moves. And again, a5, active defense. Very nicely played by Nepo. If we now take the pawn, there's check, and then a4 traps the bishop. We can take up b7, but that would just simplify. In fact, after this takes, black is probably better here after rook c2. He's going to take this pawn. So white needs to be careful. He certainly can't take on f7. So after this move, a5, d6 was played, but now bishop c4. And if we trade on c4, we're going to have a rook endgame. Black will quickly neutralize this pawn and then start pushing. And probably white has to take and go for a perpetual check on the 7th. So Grischuk decided to sack the exchange. And after having deliberated for a while, Nepo did not take it. He probably can, according to the computers. Like, take here. I think either here or soon to play king h8. Maybe d3 first. But king h8 at some point. But maybe he was just afraid of the pass pawn being protected. Maybe e5 or at some stage d7. Similar to what Grischuk had with colors reversed yesterday. So in the end, Nepo opted for taking on b3, but this resulted in well, basically mass exchanges, and we'll just see it, blah blah blah, you know, takes, and a dead drawn rook endgame. So this game is drawn. Move on to the next one. Big matchup for Fabiano as well. He has the black pieces against Alekseenko. Big win for Fabiano yesterday. And I have a feeling that, you know, most people will be trying to, you know, play for a win against Alekseenko, and Alekseenko might even, you know, sneak in some wins here and there with people trying to overpress. But he has the white pieces, and we have the Italian game, Gioco Pianissimo, the quiet Italian. So more or less, you know, standard moves. We're not going to spend too much time here. Knight e7. This surprised me a bit. Knight c6, putting pressure on the pawn. Usually we see the knights ending up on g3 for white and g6 for black. But here he's putting pressure on d4. He wants white to resolve the pressure, but the white doesn't yet. Plays a4. Now if we take on d4, we have to be careful about some a5 moves, I guess. So he plays a5, you know, just avoiding tactics. But now bishop a2. And this is the novelty by Alekseenko. And, well, understandably, because the d4 pawn is hanging, and Caruana takes it. White's idea is knight c4. If the bishop moves, we take the pawn back. We have a nice pawn center. But Caruana accepts the challenge. He wins a pawn, gives up the bishop pair. Flicks in this move c2, which actually Carlsen did not like too much. And I think they agreed afterwards it wasn't the best move, but okay, nothing too drastic. So now white has the bishop pair and potentially a very, very strong bishop here on the diagonal. So Caruana decides to neutralize one of the bishops, play bishop e6, and give up a pawn. You know, there's an attack here. If the queen moves, there's an attack here, and you have to be careful about the white, you know, damaging the structure, playing e5 at some stage. So he prefers to give the pawn on b6, play knight d7. If you take on b7, there's knight c5. Black might even force a draw. So queen goes back to e3, and now e5. So Caruana has given back the pawn, but now he starts to take over a little bit. He starts to push on the king side, g5. And yeah, if knight f5, probably knight takes e4 and then take on f5. So the knight comes back. And now we double on the f file. Maybe black can just take this pawn. And Carlsen thought about that as well. And they weren't actually sure why he shouldn't take it, so probably he should. You know, some attacking ideas like knight to g4, but okay, the pressure is building, and Alekseenko decides to trade the queens. We have to protect the pawn on d6, but now we take the pawn on a4. And here, yeah, interesting concept by Alekseenko. He plays rook d5, and then plays for domination. The knight doesn't have any squares, only a4. And we have this back and forth, rook c2, rook c4. Could have ended in a draw, but Caruana tries for more, plays knight c5. But now Alekseenko gets one of the pawns back, and soon the pawn on e5 will fall as well. So he gets the pawn back. However, after the trades, we have a rook endgame. And black has a choice. He played rook a6, and Carlsen agreed with that. He thought that b6 was too slow, rook e7 check, and e5 would be coming. g3 f4. So yeah, the commentators agreed that rook a6 was the best chance, but it looks like this should be a draw. g3 f4 looks like the most natural way to do it, but Alekseenko went another way. He decided to use his passed e-pawn. First block the passed pawn and then bring the king. And even though the king gets in, the e-pawn is strong here, and even though black is vacuum cleaning the pawns on the king side, the e-pawn is enough to hold the draw. We get the a-pawn and the rook, and eventually, yeah, we can take this and win the pawn here. Another draw, that draw. So, next game is, well, kind of the co-main game of the day. It's Ding Liren with white against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And, well, let's just get into it. d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Is it going to be a Grunfeld? Maybe not, because Dingliren goes full Alpha Zero mode already on move 3 and plays h4. And this is already kind of an anti-Grunfeld. So he's not allowing Maxime to play the Grunfeld. And in fact, after c5, d5, we now have a King's Indian. So that's already half a victory for Ding. He takes on d5, not c takes d5, the modern Bernoulli structure. He plays e takes d5. More solid structure for white and gives him a chance to build up operations on the king side. And this surprised me a little bit. Emil allows white to play h5. And after this, he takes on c3 and plays f6, giving white a double pawns. But, the bishop is still strong. But Maxime is gunning for this, e5 outpost for the knight. So castles, he plays the knight to e5. And here, I guess the move of the day. Ding played a knight to d4. Now, a very nice move. Okay, first of all, we're just ready to blast things open with f4. The king is still in the center. We have a lead in development. We wouldn't mind that. Secondly, we have a lot of squares for the knight. This one, this one, this one. And remember, this pawn is pretty strong. Emil took, but here he castled. He did not keep the extra piece. If he does, rook e1 lining up against the queen, probably castles. And here we have a nice choice. We could play bishop d3 and aim to utilize this weak diagonal. Bishop d3 probably the strongest move, or something like bishop g4 and bishop e6 when the bishop is very strong, and again f4 is coming. The key thing is that the knights, they don't really have any good squares, so white would have very good and very interesting compensation. But Emil, prefers not to defend like this, and he prefers to have some play. So he gives the piece back. However, he doesn't have a lot of play. And he kind of has to sit there and wait. So knight c5. White is going for the minority attack. The 8 pawn attacks the majority over here, trying to create a weakness. And indeed we do that by taking on b6. So a vulnerable pawn here. We take over the a file. So white is clearly better. He has the bishop pair. Some space, with the advanced pawns. He has the a file. And black doesn't really have any targets or play on its own. So the play continues, and we have a piece trade here, a double piece trade actually after knight c5. And this looks much better for white. He takes on f5 and on c5. And we have to take the d pawn because of the pin on the b pawn. So now we have a protected pass pawn. Also we have two weaknesses we can attack. And he starts attacking the e pawn. And this should have paid off. If we go a few moves further here, queen d4, rook b1, rook d1, queen f6. Here, if white just continues to build up, plays a move like this. Let's say black plays this, and we continue to build up, something like this. Build up on this pawn, and we play here. Now we could probably play queen b1. And now you see that having the two weaknesses, black can't defend everything. And again, the h pawn is stopping queen g6. So these flank pawn pushes, they can be pretty effective. So now white will win a pawn. If black goes for counterplay, we could take this pawn, take this pawn, and we're just in time to prevent this by pinning and then taking this. So white should win this. So definitely something like this should have been what happened. And Carlsen in fact said that white should win so the position that he got 9 out of 10 times. But he played d6, and Emil found a very nice move. Rook e6, followed by rook d6. It's more natural to place the rook in front of the pawn, but he gets in behind and wins the d pawn. And from here, it's basically more or less drawn. They played a lot of moves where not a lot of things happened. White is trying to create something, but we're just gonna browse through these moves. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of checks, but nothing really happens. And the evaluation stays drawn. They avoid a threefold repetition. But as you can see, a lot of checks, check on a1, another check on a1. So 2 checks everywhere. And then we come back. So Ding is trying his hardest to make something happen, but the position is just so dead that nothing to be done. Here the rooks are off, the queen comes in, but now black starts checking and there's no escaping. No escaping the perpetual, and the draw was agreed. So, important for Maxime to hold there. He keeps his chances alive. But with Ding not winning that game, his chances are probably gone forever now. I mean, they were slim before this, but now they're basically non-existent. So, we move on to the last game. Maybe the game of the day. Alex Giri with white against Wang Hao. And we have the Queen's Gambit declined, and Giri goes for the Catalan. Castles, takes, and a6. And the white plays a4. The other main line is to take on c4 when we have b5. I think a4 is more popular these days. The play is a little bit more rich. I played queen takes c4 myself, but I've been looking into trying to add a4 to my repertoire. Bishop f4. Everything more or less normal has been seen before. Takes, g takes. Generally in the Catalan, white doesn't mind too much having these double pawns. Increases the control here. You can sometimes use the g file. And black doesn't really have any way to attack the pawn or to utilize the weaknesses. We'll see later. One thought that's important. We'll come to that. But okay, e3 just protects the pawn, and black, white is very solid. Okay, knight a6, knight e5, which has been seen before, despite what people say somewhere. I don't know where their sources are coming from. Bishop takes d2, king takes d2, c6, and now the actual novelty of the game, which is h3. This position has seen other moves, but nothing special going on. So h3, I mean, really not the novelty of the year. It's not like black panics after seeing a move like h3. This is more like a long-term move. The king needs a square here. Later in the game, if the knights come off and the queen gets in without the knights and the pawn on h2, queen g4, queen f3 would be a perpetual. So h3, can be important there, and just creating the square. So nothing huge, but a small move. And Anish, he plays a lot of small improved moves in this game. So this actually turns out to be a nice game. Queen b6, queen to e2, protecting the pawn on b2. And now the first move we can criticize from black. He plays c5. I think Magnus criticized this move. The thing is, black is losing control of b5. I mean, okay, he does have b4 himself, but the difference is b5 is more important for white because he's pressing. He already has a nice piece on e5. He's going to have nice open files, 1 or 2. So this can be bad for black. And turns out it might be. So rook f1. We have a trade and another trade. Takes with the queen. And rook d1. White gets the open file. Okay, he's not penetrating yet. Queen a8. Okay, it's lining up against the king, but feels like still, the queen got a little bit misplaced there. King g1, knight b4. Now the white queen comes in. We see the b5 square starting to matter here. Knight d5, and we have a trade. And rook c1 going to the open file. Now, black seems to be always white has a nibble. Black is he can't simplify. Like rook here, you're gonna hang the pawn. We take on c8 and take on a5. Stuff like this. So okay, h6. He's trying to make a move. Queen d7. Again, attack the queen. The pawn is hanging. Bring the queen. This pawn hangs. It's difficult for black, so he moves the knight. Queen d6. And here probably the key moment. g6, which turns out to be too weakening on the king side. And now Anish plays b3. And it's actually a small quiet move. Creates a pocket here, which becomes important later. But notice now that black, it's nothing so strong, but it's hard to move. Like if you go knight d5 now I can take on g6. And you can't take back because of this. King somewhere and takes. So you make things a little bit more difficult. So black tried to find a move, h5, okay. doesn't damage the position too much. Gives away this square, but most likely not important. And white goes ahead, king h2, your move, find the move. King g7. And now he's walking into a pin, and this can be annoying. So if you try to, you know, back off, then maybe knight discovery somewhere, take on f6. Start to, you know, to become annoying. Rook d8, queen back to b2. The little pocket we talked about. Keeping the pin alive. Queen to b8, b4. And Anis's play here is very nice. Now he's taking over the b file, rook c4. He wants to simply double on the b file, and he does, even though black played b3, he will just take the pawn next, rook takes b3. Keeping the pin. Black takes on a4, but now the rook penetrating on the 7th is just too much. Queen protects the pawn, but now rook b8. Rook a7 is, I'm sorry, I will coming in here. And there's not much that we can do here. And in fact, after knight e4, knight takes f7. And everything is falling apart for Wang Hao here, and he resigned the game. So a very important win indeed for Magnus Giri. And as you can see here, he moves to joint second. Nepo is still leading with 5.5. Then we have Caruana, Graf, and Magnus Giri with 5 points. And I think we can make a pretty safe bet that you know, Carlsen's next challenger is coming from one of these 4 players. Anything else is highly unlikely. And well, the bottom 4, they'll just have to do their best. But who will be the next challenger? Only time will tell. So that's it for the 9th round recap. Hope you like it. Hope the recording is okay. Already did this, and the sound was broken. So this got delayed by 2 hours because I had to get some dinner. So yeah, I would really appreciate the like, guys. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.